Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm ready to bring you another book versus episode video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Calling All Creeps, book versus episode. Now, I gave the book a 4.7 out of 5 stars. I definitely think this is an A-tier Goosebumps book. It's one of the better written books and one of the more thought-provoking books in terms of it having some substance and trying to say something with its story. And while it's held back by some more nitpicky things that I have going for it, I think this is an absolute classic Goosebumps tale. The episode, however, I gave a 3.9 out of 5 stars. And I do think that this is a downgrade in many avenues, but I also think that it has a lot to deal with the show trying to produce episodes way in advance before books ever released at this point of season 2 when this episode came out in. And they made the episode before the book was finalized in terms of its plot and what they were going to go with. And you can clearly tell some obvious differences here. I couldn't tell if it's from production or maybe the creators involved having a role in it as well. But I just think that there's a lot that doesn't translate well from the book counterpart. So me sharing that information shouldn't be obvious that there's going to be a runaway winner here. I mean, you could probably guess which one's going to win. But I do these videos because I want to run down criteria that I think one did over the other. And in a lot of times, especially when you have that big of a point difference, as you just heard me explain with this book and this episode, you can still see some things that one that scored way lower did better than the one that scored way higher. So yeah, I think these are fun videos to do, and I see you all enjoy them, so I'm going to keep doing them for the remaining ones that at least have episodes. And in case you're wondering, I am holding a Scarecrow Walks at Midnight DVD, and it has Calling All Creeps on the back, so I'm going to use this as a point of reference. So if this is your first book versus episode video, welcome. In this series, I like to run down the criteria of what makes a story from the book to the episode. Sometimes I'll do movies to an episode or a short story to an episode. It just depends on the source material, which is often written, and then the adaptation is visual. I'd like to go over the same criteria and all, to be fair. And these are the main ones I like to run down. So first and foremost, we go over characters, run down the characters in each story, or maybe the lack thereof, and determine which one did it better there, involving characters, right? The second criteria I like to look at is atmosphere, which one had a better atmosphere. The third one is the most playful one. Sometimes we look at aesthetics or tone. And for this one, I think we're going to look at a little bit of both. We're going to look at some aesthetics. And the main aesthetic we're going to be discussing in this video is the creep design. Yes, you have the Jacobus design, which is pretty much the design that most people have to use to base their idea of what the creeps look like from the cover. And then you have the episode counterpart, which don't necessarily match up there all that well. We're going to look at the creeps design and which one I think did it better. And then we're going to look at tone. And what I'm getting at with tone is how they handle the character Ricky. Not necessarily Ricky as a character, but how they try to frame his story and maybe some differences involving that. So we're going to be looking at that. We're also going to be looking at the overall plot, which one I think had a better plot. Sometimes all it takes to be better is condensing the book source material. Sometimes it can really come down to which one just had a more enthralling or engaging story in terms of the plot. But we're going to examine both and see which one did better there. We're going to look at the climax. Which one had a better climax? Like the build-up point where the release is going to happen. Which one had the more appealing climax, let's just say. And then we're going to look at the ending. Which one had a better ending? Which one had the better way to send off the story? So I feel remiss that we are going to start with characters because we always start here. But let's go ahead and start with the main character, Ricky. because that's a good jumping off point. I'm going to be upfront. I think the book is vastly superior than the episode. And let me explain myself here. I think Ricky in the book is a very well-written character. He has great prowess and monologue and just a great upfront personality where he doesn't sugarcoat things. He is a realist. He is upfront and impersonal with his inner thoughts about the situations he experiences with the reader. He'll openly say, hey, I shouldn't have said that, or that sounded dumb, or I know I'm a wimp, I'll never be able to join a sports team, but, I'm going to try it anyway. He's that type of character. And he's written to be a nerd archetype, but he defies everything that makes a nerd archetype and makes him relatable and more universal. Yes, not everybody can relate to Ricky's specific situation he's going through, being how his peers view him, I should say, and how they treat him, which is awful, by the way. But like I said, not everybody can relate to that, but the way he's written makes you empathize with him on a deeper level. And by the end of the story, you feel what he feels, and you kind of feel like you become his friend in a lot of ways. The episode, however, takes Ricky and removes what made him great in the book by just sticking him into a typical wimp archetype. And he's just so depressing and moody and aloof. And he's just not as good. Nowhere near as good as this book counterpart. He's just odd. And I don't blame the actor or the performer here, the guy who played Ricky. Like I said, I don't know the reason why they went with this direction with this character here, but he just seems over dramatic, you know what I mean, in the role, and I don't like it. So if I had a preference, Ricky goes to the book all day long. Now, Ricky's best friend, or I guess closest friend in both versions here, is Iris, so I guess we'll go with Iris next. Iris, I think in the book, was a solid character. Her moments in the story to shine are pretty much the same as the episode. She's essentially there to be Ricky's rock as he's going through this experience, trying to get back at this girl named Tasha, who is the next character we're going to be talking about, and trying to maybe help him at a certain point of the story when he's dug his hole, let's just say. But I think the episode slightly does better with her, so I'm going to give the edge to the episode, if only because the actress who played her was able to capture her kind nature a lot better than I think the book was able to get across. And on top of that, I think the inclusion of her character and the twist, and I guess the ending of the story, actually helps make her character more memorable in the process. And because she's involved, it impacts the resonance of the story in some significant ways. Now, this isn't really judging how much a character is included to give a win here, but she's basically equally present in both versions here, but I just like the inclusion and what they did with her character here more so in the episode, so she's going to the episode for the victory. Now, Tasha, the next character, is the newspaper columnist who, in the book, does not like Ricky whatsoever, and kind of like the episode as well, now that I'm thinking about it, has excluded him for participating in the newspaper because she feels like she has to let him do this because everybody's required to do an extracurricular to get some sort of points accumulated so they can graduate 6th grade or whatnot. So I feel like there's more backstory and motive to why she's mean to Ricky in the book. And honestly, I think the moments in the book definitely outweigh the moments in the episode, because in the episode, they just play her as some conniving girl that is, I guess one step behind Ricky, but really one step ahead at the same time. Now, she's serviceable. She's not terrible. But I feel like she's not as rich as her book counterpart, and she didn't have that many fun moments. I think the camera moment in the book and the extra moment we get with the Pepsi kind of elevated her character a little bit in the story. And you do see her later on near the end also involved, as you do in the episode. I don't know. This could be a toss-up depending on the criteria I guess we're going down. I could definitely see some people go in the episode, but I'm going to give the edge to the book and just leave Tasha there. Now, the next four, I guess we're going to group all of these kids together. We have Wart, Brenda, David, and Jared. Well, off the bat, Jared is not in the episode because often than not in the 90s show, they axed out unnecessary characters when they could. And Jared hardly had a role in the book. He was just kind of there. So Jared, by default, goes to the book. But all the other three characters, Wart, Brenda, and David, they serve the same purpose in the story. Now, we have to get into some spoilers of what their involvement is. I was very apprehensive of sharing names of who the creeps were in my book and in my episode review. But they are these three, I guess, including Jared, if we're talking about the book. They are the creeps. In my opinion, I think the creeps in the episode were serviceable. I think that they were creepy and they did basically everything that they did creepily in the book. However, I think in the book, there's, I guess, aided by Ricky's monologue, it made what the creeps were doing to him a little more cerebral for me. And I think they came across a bit more effectively in the book while reading it compared to watching it in the episode. And I don't know if it had to deal with the transformations kind of taking me out of the threat level of the creeps at some points, or maybe the really bad ADR voice acting. But if I had a preference for the creeps wholesale as characters, I'd probably give it to the book. And it's by a little bit, not by a lot, but I just slightly prefer the book, like I said, for those reasons. Now, I guess one last set of characters we can look at is the parents of the story, the parents of Ricky. They actually play a role in the story of the book. I don't think we even get to see them at all in the episode, so I guess by default they go to the book already. But one thing I think the parents do really good in the book is that Ricky comes to a point where he has to tell somebody, and he doesn't know whether if he can tell his friends or he should try telling his family or maybe his principal. So he entertains telling his parents, and we get a sense of how the parents react to Ricky. And while they're not the worst ever, that moment in the story was the big aha moment for Ricky, saying that, oh, okay, well, I'm going to need to find the one person I really need to find that I can convince I'm telling the truth. And unlike, most moments that we get in Goosebumps that kind of resemble this in the you gotta believe me aspect where the parents just come off more annoying, they actually have legitimate cause to kind of scoff at Ricky here. Because what he's saying sounds very tinfoil hat and alien theorist conspiracy-like. So, yeah, the parents are non-existent in the episode, but in the book, they're still fun. So I guess we'll mention them here as one last set of characters. So, that out of the way, let's get into the second criteria, the atmosphere. In the book, there was a winter time period that this story took place in, and there's some snow. Other than that, majority of the story takes place in and around a school, which the episode does quite well for being more of a uni-location story, minus maybe a few cutaways to Ricky's bedroom at times. But if I had a preference on atmosphere, it all comes down to Proust writing. Even though the atmosphere building wasn't as strong as some other Goosebumps books, I definitely think the book had a stronger atmosphere because it highlighted how cold it was outside, and that kind of helped elevate some parts of the story, unlike the episode. And even though the episode had a cool creep layer and all that, if I had to give the edge, I'm going to give it to the book. I think the book just has better atmosphere, and perhaps it has to deal with it being on paper and being able to be more descriptive, and this being a low-budget show and having that visual medium. Sometimes it doesn't translate well, but atmosphere, I think in this case, goes to the book. Now, getting down to criteria 3, the aesthetics and tone, I guess we'll go ahead and start with tone, and this is how we deal with Ricky's character. Kind of going back to what I said about Ricky. In the episode, they made him more aloof and nowhere near as universally relatable as the book counterpart. The book just defied the expectation of him being a nerd archetype and humanized him in a realistic way. And I feel like, since I'm kind of retreading ideas that I've already said and just my overall thoughts of Ricky as a character, I think it's obvious that if I had a preference, I'm going to give it to the book. And you can go back to my thoughts on the character himself and kind of pick up the rest here. But yeah, I just think the direction they took with the book in terms of tone and how that translates to how Ricky narrates the story is way better than the episode. So take that for what you will. Now, the aesthetics. We're going to look at the creep design. Which one I think did it better? Is it the Jacobus look or is it the TV show look? I'm going to piss a lot of people off. I'm going to piss a lot of people off. But if I'm being honest, the Jacobus art here, I've always thought looked kind of goofy. Just looks kind of goofy. Now, you can say the TV episode looks kind of goofy too, but here's the thing and why I like the episode more, and I'm going to give the edge to the episode here for creep design, is that when I look at the creeps, they look like dinosaurs. They look like aliens. The creeps here, they just look like generic lizards. And if I'm being honest, I think the yellow skin does it a bit better for me too. I know. Purple skin. They're purple skin in the book, Completionist. I get that. But yeah, I think the design choice they went with in the episode is far cooler. So take that for what you will, but I'm going to give the aesthetic to the episode here. Now, getting down to the overall plot, they both kind of fall down the same story here, minus the book having some extended events, so to speak. So both are essentially Ricky wants revenge on Tasha. He tries to sabotage the computer with that message saying, calling all creeps, call this number after midnight, blah, blah, blah. And Tasha catches wind of it and puts Ricky's name and Ricky's phone number instead, which starts the incidents of getting random phone calls after midnight, or I guess premeditated phone calls after midnight, I should say, from these creeps looking for a leader to set up a meeting so they can infiltrate the school and turn all the kids into creeps themselves. It's basically the story either way you go. However, one is just a condensed version of the story, and one is a more, I guess, padded out version of it. Either way, if I had a preference, this might shock you, because normally I like cutting the fat when you can, and I think that is a legitimate strength of the episode, because it does function well plot-wise without the added exposition that's in the first 40 pages of the book, and without certain other extended events that we get in the book that just aren't in the episode, either due to budget or due to small tweaks and changes to kind of make it fit a runtime. But if I had a preference on plot, I just think that it's laid out a bit better in the book. I like the fact that we start out in the present in the first chapter, then we go into the expository chapters for a little bit, and then we get caught back up to speed after we know the full context. It helps really establish Ricky's character, and it helps establish what this book is going to be. As in the episode, we're just thrown into this situation where Ricky looks like a buffoon because we don't have the context to build off of it. We don't have that extra story. And the reasonings that we do get because of that expedition here aren't as good and aren't as rich as the book. So there is a cost with that. So in terms of plot, I'm going to have to give it to the book. Now, in terms of the climax, there's technically a fake or maybe even two fake climaxes in both versions here. After the point where Ricky is confronted by the creeps, let's just say, they start to force him to come up with these solutions to utilize these transformation seeds that they need to put into food and give out to fellow students and faculty so they can turn into creeps and join this creep revolution and take over humanity, let's just say. There's some moments involving different foods that they kind of try to poison first but doesn't work out, so then they go with a backup plan, let's just say. And this also involves Iris coming into the plot at both points as well at this point of the story. If I had a preference, I think the book had a better build than the episode, but they're both kind of serviceable in the same regard. So it's kind of hard to really decide here. Part of me wants to just tie them because they serve the same functional purpose. But if I had a slight preference, I'm going to give it to the book because I think the book just had a more satisfying build compared to the episode. While the episode is decent with that build, it's just not as good as the book, if I'm being honest. So take that for what you will. Which leads us to the actual ending of the story. Once the tension is released in the climax and we know the plan of what's going to happen, ultimately the climax in both versions are involving this bake sale that the creeps and Ricky and Iris have put some plan and methodical intent into, I should say, involving a batch of cookies that they're going to give out to the student body that are completely free. And of course, that plays into a decision that Ricky has to make involving that. That's technically climax part 2. And then the ending happens shortly, if not right after the tension point releases. And essentially, the release point is him coming up with a solution to his current problem and how he's going to move forward, I guess, for the rest of his life. So the ending here, I think it's absolutely iconic in the book. And it definitely sends home what the story's about. And I think, in my opinion, the story's about power and gaining power. The episode, I think, does a slightly better job at highlighting that aspect about Ricky. But having Iris in the story also adds a different layer that's kind of missing in the book counterpart because she's not there. And Iris witnesses Ricky make this choice, and it breaks her heart. And she notices the tragedy and the downfall of a good person. And it kind of brings to light of the cost of power, which is kind of prevalent in the book, but I think it's more evident here because of Iris there, and it makes it more poignant. So for that, I'm going to give the ending edge to the episode. So with those criteria out the way, this book versus episode had some close calls, in my opinion. When it comes down to characters, I think Iris was better in the episode. And for what it's worth, while the book mainly went out in characters, I think the book had pretty close atmosphere to the episode at times, as well as the characters. The atmosphere I gave to the book because it has that winter flair. And the episode still, for what it is, being a low-budget show, it's still serviceable. I think the aesthetics in the episode is better in terms of creep designs and what have you. While I think that the tone is better with Ricky, the overall plot is more rich in the book, and that's more of a clear victory over the episode. And while the climaxes are kind of even and it has a better ending, I think majority of the time, the book is right there with it. And the only things that the episode really improves on are like side characters and maybe adding an additional context to the ending that really do help set it apart for me. Aside from the fact that I think the creep look is absolutely killer in the episode compared to the Jacobus art on the cover here that I absolutely prefer as well. I just think the book is a superior product of the story overall. So if I had a preference of either version here, the book or the episode, for Calling All Creeps, I'm going to give the victory here to the book. And it's by quite a few hairs for me. I just think wholesale, the episode is a downgrade in terms of its overall package. Yes, it's still fun and entertaining to watch. It might be an actual genuine good episode. Might be a fan favorite to a lot of you out there. But I just think this book is something special. And once you read this book and compare it to this episode, yeah, on the superficial aspects of it, they do kind of hold up and compare up. But nothing can compare to how this book just registers in terms of how it's written and how just better Ricky is. And honestly, that's pretty much the big plus I have with the book over the episode. It's just the fact that Ricky's story is just so well done and well told in the book. It's hard to match that magic with the episode. I think the episode kind of suffers from its cousin Night of the Living Dummy 2's episode adaptation, where you have a strong narrative-focused book like Night of the Living Dummy 2, for example, but you can't translate that well to an episode because it's just hard to pull off. So I get that might be the case here, and probably the same case, I should say. But at the end of the day, I think both are serviceable. And at the end of the day, Goosebumps is a book franchise, first and foremost. Go read the book and then watch the episode. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised either way you go if you decide one over the other to try first. But I definitely urge you to go read the book before you try the episode, because you're going to see things that you are going to love in the book that you might not see in the episode, but you're going to see some things that the episode does that might shock you and might impress you, that will win you over in some aspects over the book counterpart as well. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Calling All Creeps. Let me know down in the comment section, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the book? Do you prefer the episode? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.